The LA Chargers had a very solid regular season last year, and for Chargers fans' sake, we are not going to talk about what happened in the postseason. So instead, we'll just move right on to this year's predictions, starting with week one. I think that they have a really good opportunity to compete in this game against the Chiefs. It is in Sao Paulo, so an interesting international game to start the year. And I do think that while the Chargers have made some improvements, we've seen Justin Herbert play really, really well in the regular season, particularly. They absolutely have a chance to win this game against the Chiefs. I just don't see Kansas City losing week one, though. Kansas City is a slightly better team, and I think that they're going to be able to take care of business in this international game.
Big reason we're going to lean the Chiefs here is that the Chargers will be without Rashawn Slater for the entire season after he suffered an injury during the offseason and training camp. And that is a humongous loss for this offensive line that was going to be very, very good for the Chargers. And without him, I do have some concerns about can this offense still be just as good as it was last year. Week two against the Raiders. This is a team we are pretty high on going into this season with the acquisition of Geno Smith, along with drafting Ashton Genty. This offense is going to be very good, along with Brock Bowers in his second year in the league. Defensively, you still have Max Crosby, but still leaves a little bit to be desired at some of the other positions, particularly in that wide receiver room. Jacoby Myers is your best wide receiver, and I don't think he is a big difference maker in this game. Meanwhile, the Chargers still have Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey in their wide receiver room, a new running back room with Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris. And defensively, they still will be very solid considering they are coached by Jim Harbaugh. They will get the win here on the road against the Raiders to move to 1-1. And then they play their third AFC West opponent in the Denver Broncos at home. And this Broncos team is going to be very good. Year two for Bo Nix after a very solid rookie season. And he has a new backfield with J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. Same wide receivers for the most part, though, and a defense that is one of the better defenses we will see in the NFL with the reigning DPOI in Pat Surtain. This Denver team is going to be very good, but we are going to lean with the home team here. I do think this Chargers offense, even with Rashawn Slater out, is still going to be very good. There's just way too many playmakers on this team for them to suffer, even with the loss of one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL.
Next up is a road trip to face the Giants. This one honestly should be pretty easy for the Chargers. I think the Giants are not going to be a good team next year. They got Russell Wilson at quarterback, which is at least an improvement from Danny Dimes. The defense isn't terrible, but there's just not enough pieces all around in order to compete with teams like the Chargers. So LA gets this win. Then it's the Commanders at home. This game's going to be quite a bit tougher. We really think the Commanders are going to have as good of a season as they did last year. They looked very, very good. And I think Jaden Daniels is due for a really solid season. They added Debo Samuel to this offense. The defense still pretty solid. So I do think that Washington's going to have a good year. And even though the Chargers are at home, I think that they are going to lose this game, dropping to 3-2. But against the Dolphins the next week, there's a very high likelihood that they can get back in the win column. We're not super high on this Miami team. I think that with all of the injuries that they've had over the past few seasons with Tua and Devon Achane and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, those four guys are very rarely healthy all at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised if that was kind of the case this year as well. Their defense also just isn't very good, even if all four of those players on offense do stay healthy. So we think that the Dolphins just aren't going to be as good of a team. The Chargers should get this win and move to 4-2.
The Colts the next week is kind of a similar story, but for the opposite reasons. The defense actually isn't too bad, especially with the addition of Charvarius Ward, but this offense is leaving a lot to be desired. You still have Jonathan Taylor, who is one of the better running backs in the NFL, and a solid wide receiver core of Michael Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs. along with adding Tyler Warren at the tight end position behind a great offensive line. But when it comes down to it, the most important position on the offense is your quarterback. And when you're not very confident in who your starting quarterback is, I'm scared for that team. Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback as of right now, and I have very little faith in him to actually become a competent quarterback. But if he beat out Anthony Richardson and Anthony Richardson ever returns to the starting lineup for the Colts, I don't know if it's going to be much better. The Chargers are way more consistent. I know what I'm getting out of Justin Herbert and the rest of this offense. Defensively, they should be able to cause some trouble, especially with Khalil Mack still on the team, and make whoever the starting quarterback is for Indy uncomfortable, and they get the win here, moving to 5-2. Then it's a Thursday night game against the Vikings and a little bit of a reunion as Jim Harbaugh takes on his former starting quarterback at the University of Michigan in JJ McCarthy, who is now starting for the Vikings after Sam Darnold moved on to Seattle. And this Vikings team is going to be very interesting because so much of this season hinges on JJ McCarthy. If he can be a serviceable starting quarterback in this offense, the Vikings can be just as good as they were last year. Maybe a little bit of a regression, but still very good considering they still have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. Just a very solid set of offensive weapons, not to mention making some improvements on the offensive line, which was one of the worst in the NFL last season. Defensively, D line is great. Maybe some issues in the secondary, but I still feel very good about this Vikings defense. But if JJ McCarthy can't be a good quarterback, especially considering he hasn't played football in 18 months since his injury, then this Vikings team can struggle, kind of similar to the Colts. The Chargers are just the more consistent team here. I know what I'm getting out of this Chargers team. They're going to be just the better team in this game. I trust what I'm getting out of Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. They get the win and move to 6-2. And then they're on the road against the Titans, and Cam Ward, as the number one overall pick, is in a tough situation. The offense he is in is okay with some veteran wide receivers like Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett. The running back room, not great, and the offensive line leaves a little bit to be desired. And then defensively, he's going to get very little help. This Titans team is going to struggle mightily this season, especially against a Chargers team that is still going to be very, very competitive, even if they lose some players to injury along the way. 7-2 for the Chargers going into a game against the Steelers.
That game against the Steelers is going to be in prime time, and I think it's going to be a relatively difficult game for this Chargers team. Aaron Rodgers joining the Steelers, and he had a really good season with the Jets last year, although the Jets themselves didn't have the best of seasons. The Steelers going to be a really solid offense, adding DK Metcalf as well. And when you look at the defense, you still have TJ Watt. So I think that this is a very, very good team. The Chargers have been on a little bit of a win streak here. I think it comes to an end against the Steelers. They drop one at home and then go on the road to face the Jaguars. Not super high on Jacksonville. I think that they have a lot to figure out still. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been the best. We saw him deal with a concussion last year as well. They added Travis Hunter, a two-way player through the NFL draft. He's going to be needed quite a bit at wide receiver, I would think, to complement Brian Thomas Jr. This Jaguars team isn't one of the best teams in the NFL by any standard, not even close to the middle of the pack, in my opinion. But I think that with the home field advantage, this is a game that the Chargers could potentially trip up in heading into their bye week. So we actually have Jacksonville pulling off quite the upset and dropping LA to 7-4. And then the Raiders after the bye week. Connor already hit most of the points for this Raiders team earlier. I think that they're going to have a pretty impressive season compared to what most people are expecting. He kind of hit on the points about their offense being a little bit underrated, kind of sneaky with Chip Kelly as the new offensive coordinator. Ashton Genty should have a really, really good year. I think that the Raiders are able to split the season series with the Chargers, getting this win and dropping the Chargers to 7-5 on a three-game losing streak now.
And with their next couple opponents, it's going to be hard for them to get out of that losing streak. With that first game being a Monday night game against the Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champs. And what hasn't been said about this Eagles team? One of the most complete teams in the NFL, an offense that has so many weapons with Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley behind it, one of the best offensive lines, and you still have Jalen Hurts, who is still pretty underrated. And then defensively, one of the best defenses over the last 5 years, just constantly getting better through draft acquisitions. I just can't believe some of the talent that they get. This Eagles team is going to be very good. It's a long road trip for them to take on the Chargers, and maybe the Chargers are feeling the heat after dropping 3 games in a row, especially 2 games that they maybe shouldn't have lost, especially to the Jaguars and Raiders at home. It might be a little controversial, but we actually have the Chargers getting the win over the reigning Super Bowl champs. Upsets do happen, and I do think this Chargers team has the offensive firepower to keep up with the Eagles and maybe get a couple stops along the way. Definitely going to be a high scoring game going back and forth, but the Chargers do pull off the upset here. And then a road trip against the Chiefs. They dropped the game in Brazil in their first game of the year. Now they're at Arrowhead. They don't get the benefit of playing the Chiefs in LA. So the Chiefs will have a little bit of an advantage here. And if Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce get out of the funk they were in last season, having one of their statistical worst seasons, then the Chiefs could sweep the season series. But I think the Chargers are just too good to get swept by this Chiefs team. Even if they do have to play them at Arrowhead, they're actually going to win 2 games in a row against some of the best teams in the NFL in the Eagles and the Chiefs and move to 9-5.
Next up is a road trip to face the Dallas Cowboys. Biggest story with them is they just traded away Micah Parsons, Jerry Jones continuing to do Jerry Jones things. And I don't really think that the Cowboys are going to be very good after doing that. When you look at the actual stats, they go from being the first ranked defense with Parsons on the field to 31st when he is not on the field. So this Cowboys defense could actually be really bad this season, despite extending players like Deron Bland. I think that their offense is honestly really solid, and they are going to be able to compete with teams like the Chargers. Even though LA's on the road, though, I think the fact that the Cowboys don't have Parsons anymore is something that's going to be able to give Los Angeles a win here. The Texans at home, going to be a pretty tough game. This is a rematch of the first round of the playoffs last season, and that did not go well for LA at all. Justin Herbert threw, I think it was 4 interceptions, and the Chargers just got absolutely blown out. This game will probably be a little bit closer, but I still think the Texans are a better team. They clearly have the recipe for how to beat Los Angeles. So I think that they'll get it done here and drop the Chargers to 10-6.
And their final game of the season is a road trip against the Broncos. They did get the win early on in the season, but it is very hard to beat the Broncos when they are playing at Mile High, one of the toughest stadium environments in the country. And as we mentioned before, this Broncos defense is one of the better defenses in the NFL. It's the same story with the other AFC West teams. It's very hard for them to sweep the other. I think the Chargers and Broncos are very evenly matched, and this might have a lot of playoff implications as well for both of these teams. With that much on the line, the Broncos are going to get the job done at home and drop the Chargers to 10-7, but still a very good season for them considering they will be without one of their best players in Rashawn Slater.
10-7 is a one-game dip from the 11-6 record that we saw last year, but still very likely good enough to get the Chargers into the postseason. I think the floor could be as low as 7-10. A lot of things would have to go wrong in order for this to happen, as we did already have them losing to a decent amount of the better teams that they'd play, I would say. The ceiling 12-5, so one game better than we saw last season is very possible for this Chargers team, especially if players like Lad McConkey continue to have as good of a season as they did last year, and the defense also improves this season. The Vegas over-under is at 9.5 wins, and it is slightly favoring the under. We have them just barely over, so it's basically right there with Vegas.
If the offensive line of the Chargers is able to gel early with having some jumbled up players, considering their starting right tackle is actually an offensive guard, but if that offensive line could still be very solid this season, then the Chargers are going to be just fine, and we can see them hit that ceiling despite having a pretty difficult schedule. But if that offensive line is not able to protect Justin Herbert enough and he plays more like we saw in the playoffs with so many turnovers, then this floor is more than attainable with this schedule. I don't think we will see that from the Chargers. I think this offense is way too good. I think Lad McConkey in his rookie season looked very promising, and Quentin Johnson took some steps forward. I think Amari Hampton's going to be a great addition to this offense. We know how much Jim Harbaugh loves his running backs. I'm excited to see how the season plays out for the Chargers, but 10-7 will be our prediction for them as of right now. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our content, and we will see you in the next video.